Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals?
More fire? Yes, please.
The air here tasted bitter. Steps were too tall for a person. The entire place felt restless, like it had been vexed to nightmare under the dust, waiting for its hour to come around at last. Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. If they didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger. One small step for a fox, he thought. Stay away from the other guy's sword, you know?
Felt like Tarzan.
How could a temple to Iblis still even exist? The Transcendent Emperor had destroyed all the shrines of the lost gods after exiling them. Had it been buried in that long-ago battle? Or had Iblis foreseen his fate and hidden it from his enemy?
No one could beat Renato at hot potato.
What kind of raven can't fly? Thought Renato. The ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. There was an inscription. No spitting.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? Give me blood. It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. Kill the Emperor's daughter. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the Transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "It's the core," said the stone anxiously. The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance.
The stone felt a bit clingy. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Skyripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power.
He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Renato had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at sword school together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself. Except the biggest one. That she was the Emperor's daughter. No. Kill Zenobia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be Imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead.
The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "The call will kill you." "Are you afraid of it?" Don't be ridiculous. It chuckled. "But it's unstable. It will poison you if someone just carry it. And if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically." Renato did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards. This couldn't be good for global warming. Bring out your eyes. As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical. No, it's too much power. We will rip a hole in space and time.
He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out.
When Renato came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent.
"I can't hear you," he sang out. And, "You?" It didn't answer. "Ha!" he said.
He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer made its way toward the Nexus, Bernardo watched sparks fly out of the core. The Iblis stone sucked them in hungrily. You'd think the stone would want this kind of power, wouldn't it? Thought Bernardo. Well, the scientists would explain it all.
This time, Bernardo was sure he'd figured out how to use the core safely.
See? He'd trusted his gut, and it had worked out. That's what it meant to be a hero. To ignore the naysayers and the oddmakers, and do what you knew was right, and have it turn out to be the right thing. Well, he wasn't worried. Once he got to the observatory, the scientist toads could explain it. Then he could carry the war into the enemy's camp and destroy them all. He was getting a little bloodthirsty, wasn't he?
He'd once met a pirate captain who used hooks to get around his ship. Oh, what was his name again?
Bernardo had never felt better in his life. Normally, a battle would wear him down, and he would need a night's sleep. Now he felt like he could go all night and all day. He felt like people were cheering him on, and he could practically hear their applause as he slew one raven after another.
The Iblis Stone and the Skyripper Core. Two artifacts from the time of legends. Bernardo was becoming a legendary hero, wasn't he? He had enough power to save the rebellion, but he had to understand this power, so he would not misuse it. to earth. Renato told the corpses. It was something he'd seen in a play once.
The toads at the observatory measured the stone with their occult devices. I fed it the core of Sky Ripper, explained Renato. No more feed planet souls.
But the core is not an unlimited energy source,
said one toad. Another said,
There's a feedback loop, you see, which could overload the stone.
The stone doesn't actually feed on souls,
claimed a third.
but on pain of killing another sentient being. If you can truly be at peace with yourself, it would not overload.
This was all very confusing. At peace? Yes, the mountains were peaceful and quiet, but he now had the power to turn the tides. He should report to the Rebellion Council and prepare for the decisive battle.
The one thing he understood from all the Toad arguments, maybe the stone did not feed on blood, or souls, or rage. It fed on empathy. It fed on the pain he felt when he put an end to another being's existence. Even if that other being was a raven intent on killing him. If he could find peace, then he could use the power of the Ibla Stone without being taken over by its evil. The mountains. He would go to the mountains. He could find peace there. Unfortunately, the mountains were not empty. There were ravens everywhere. No matter. He had to fight, yes, but he didn't have to be angry. Parry, dodge, slash, and breathe. Yes, focus on the rhythm, the dance of it, not on the blood or the raven's core as they died. Ah, it was working. He wasn't feeling those dark jolts of eldritch energy. He wasn't feeding the Iblis Stone.
He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons. There was an inscription on the platform. Balaleka lessons, with an address.
The stone was still silent. His mind was his own, and his heart, too. He bore them no ill will, these ravens. They were doing their job. They were expressing their nature. Dance, whirl, parry, jab, and breathe. It was all so simple, wasn't it? Something was missing. He didn't feel truly at peace. Wait. Wasn't this near where Calaveras lived? The sage would help him figure it all out.
Do old ravens go grey? You know what? Don't worry about it.
Okay, welcome to the Shane Show.
Boom.
Oh man, that sucks, man. We do appreciate you coming here though. Sorry about your stream.
The Iblis Stone, silenced by the Sky Ripper's core, had given Renato enough power to challenge the Imperial fleet. But what Renato was seeking was inner peace. The rebellion was on the verge of extinction, but it would have to wait. At the end of the mountain path, he found the wise Calaveras in his workshop. Do you fix souls or only artifacts? He asked the sage.
Okay.
Does your soul need fixing?
Asked the sage. I've been killing a lot of ravens lately, he told the sage.
You're a fox,
Said Calaveras.
and to kill birds is part of your nature. You should take joy in it. I mean, I might as well worry about eating flies. Don't you like a fly?
It was true. That's what he had forgotten. The joy. Now he was ready for the final battle. The Farfarer cut through the clouds. The air had never felt so sweet since he was a child.
There it was. The dreaded Imperial fleet. He could smell wet hemp ropes ahead, wood and tar, and ravens. Even the fleet smelt good, somehow. He was ready.
He was ready.
Renato had it all squared away in his head.
He would kill the Emperor. Isengrim III had begun well, but he had gone mad. He was trying to invoke the lost gods by means of dark, blasphemous rituals. That was a secret. But the victims had spoken to Renato. The ghosts had spoken. No. No anger. Renato could not afford anger. It was empowering the crystal in his sword. That made him stronger, but it clouded his mind. He would not be a hero. A hero strives. Renato would just be one with everything. The Emperor would die, and the wheel would turn, and all would be restored without rancor, without sorrow, without pain.
Oh, now you smell even worse.
Burnt fur. It wasn't his fault. They looked so breakable. But the more he thought about it, and he had so much more time to think about it now that he was not worrying about the battle, killing the Emperor would not change anything. Another would take his place. Perhaps Zenobia. Perhaps the Speaker of the Rebel Council, and power would corrupt them too, and death would make grief, and grief would lead to hatred. He must lead by example. Reject the violence. Reject the desire to create violence. But how?
There was an inscription. Praised the sun.
Finally, he came to the Emperor's ship. The path behind him was strewn with dead ravens. The path to enlightenment. His mistake, he realized, was trying to change the world. The world would spin and the wheel would revolve whether he strove against it or not. What he had to do was nothing. He had attained enlightenment. He sat down, adopted a full lotus position, and began to meditate. And all around him, the warriors stopped fighting too. They knew. They could feel his enlightenment. They gave up fighting, dropped their weapons, and became his disciples. No, just kidding. The nearest raven stabbed him with a sword and then chopped off his head. I might not have thought this through properly. Thought Renado's head as it rolled around the deck and died. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the Path of Destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renado knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renado had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renado really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Ah, Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lapino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lapino had told him over the Far Speaker anyway. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen the winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? That was odd. Renado had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. But this time, there were so many more Ravens. When Renado went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous. Renado thought of the Iblis Stone and shivered. He had no business messing with ancient, cruel artifacts. What he needed was his friends around him. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose.
couldn't hack this kind of firewall. You had to warm it up to you. What was the point of this gate? Did they think no one would notice the lever? What else could you hook?
I need more materials, thought Renato.
Everything's strange. How's your day going?
In this chest, there were woodcuts of amazingly beautiful vixens wearing no clothes at all, and something more useful. missed his old skills. He welcomed them back like he was at a reunion.
Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino.
Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest.
Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The Ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, we see this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows. And that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the Transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Bernardo had already let that armature slip away to save Lupino's life. But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that. The core of the Sky Ripper? Lupino's excited. That's an actual thing that we can just go and get. You've been busy.
He sure had. Renato told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. True, the core was capable of terrible, uncontrollable destruction. But this time, he was sure it would work great. It's beautiful here, thought Renato. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lupino was a traitor. But still, he was good company.
There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones. No healthy ones. We're getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Lapino was right. Maybe they should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy. Like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato ached to get away from it. He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Renato ached to be rid of it.
Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost.
The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato.
But what if Lapino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Lapino was a touchy rabbit. Renato knew that.
You're brave, I know, Renato said. But this is what I was hired to do.
Oh, well, at least let me run ahead and warn them you're coming.
Renato wondered if Lapino was up to no good. What if the rabbit warned the Empire instead? Oh, but Lapino wouldn't betray him like that. Not again. Before it'd been a fluke, right? They finished the trip to the Nexus in silence. He would offer Lapino a chance to betray him, or not to. His old friend deserved another chance to prove true.
All right, Renato said. Go.
As Renato watched Lapino vanish on the horizon, he could feel nausea building in him. He felt ill. Could his knees really be aching this much? But how could he have handed the core off to Lapino? That was a recipe for disaster.
Renato wondered if his future self had commissioned these poles.
Chest full of old banana peels. There had to be more. There was. Renato felt worse. All his joints were aching now. He'd been through beatings that felt better than this. So the core had a kind of poison that could harm you without even touching you. That's new. Well, it had power. The rebellion needed something with power. And how was this any worse than a sword wound?
Renato had given up in the Sky Ripper's armature to save his friend Lupino. But without its armature, Sky Ripper's core was a deadly poison. Take a leap of faith, said the inscription.
Really look for another line of work, he thought. And then he died.
Everything hurt. And then it didn't. Bloodstains out of his tunic.
observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists everywhere. Bernardo found the Mad Rabbit cowering under a desk. The Ravens, they must have known we were coming, said Lupino. How did you... Well, see, I was doing a card trick with my lucky deck, and I kind of bobbled the cards, so I went under the desk to gather them up, and boom! I guess we'll have to take the car straight to the secret base.
Bernardo wasn't sure he believed that, but Lupino was talking so fast. It always seemed to make sense.
The secret rebel base. Yes. They had engineers there. But wait. Calaveras, the sage in the mountains. Maybe he would know what to do with the naked core. The core was killing him. He needed help. The sage, Calaveras, had given him the maps to find the armature and the core. If anyone knew the true name of the Transcendent Emperor, if anyone knew how to assemble the Sky Ripper, Calaveras did. If anyone could heal Reynardo and render the core safe, at least to its bearer, surely it was he.
The base of the mountain was the only safe place for a landing. He would have to continue on foot, muscles aching.
Calaveras was a scholar, not a doctor. Could he really save Reynardo from the poison radiating from the lost god's eye he was so recklessly carrying?
Okay, everybody, I'm gonna end it right here. I appreciate everybody coming and all. Thank you, Shadow. Thank you, Red. Thank you. Red Dragon, sorry. Thank you, Wyatt, and that's all. So I appreciate everybody coming to the stream. We'll do this tomorrow, and I'll see y'all next time. This is Ashley from Vic&Ashley Game. See y'all next time.